This is Peri Sheinin on behalf of Unbox Sports, an agency that highlights and elevates professional tennis coaches. Today I'm joined by Sandra Zaniewska, the coach of Marta Kostyuk. Sandra, how are you?
I'm doing great, thank you.
So I want to start off by talking about how you got into tennis.
Funny story, I was 10 years old, so I think pretty late for most players, but I was always a very active kid. My parents didn't really have any ties to tennis, but I have an older brother, he's 11 years older, he used to skateboard, and me as a little sister, I wanted to do the same thing as him. I was begging my mom to get a skateboard for a long time. She was like, no chance, you're not getting one, it's not for girls, plus you're gonna injure yourself, you should really just think about something else, but I kept nagging her. And one day she finally agreed to get me a skateboard. We went to the store to buy it, and at that store, she met a friend that she hasn't seen for many, many years, and they started catching up and talking about, how their kids are doing. And my mom's friend said that her son is playing tennis, and my mom was like, "Oh, I'm gonna take you to a tennis court instead of getting you a skateboard." So the next day, I went to a tennis court, and I fell in love with the sport right away, and here I am, many, many years later.
What lessons did you take from that whole experience?
You might think, or you might plan, and you might want one thing, but life is just going to take you where it's going to take you, and that's it.
And it took you to the Pro Tour, where you won 17 ITF Pro Singles titles and achieved top 200 singles ranking as well. What did you learn from your pro experience?
My first trip abroad when I was alone, I was 14 years old, and back then we didn't have, iPhones or like connectivity like we have today. So the international calls were very expensive. I could only send one text a day, to my mom just saying, "Hey, I'm okay, everything is fine." My mom couldn't really check the score online, nor of how I did yesterday or the day before. She just knew the scores because I texted her whether I won or lost the match. And I think that made me grow up very quickly. And just, the determination, the patience, the tenacity, all of this, I think that these things you learn on the tennis court. I think at any sport you will learn them, and at any sport that you play, but I think tennis is very different because you are alone on the court, so you have to deal with things yourself, it's not like a team sport.
How do you think traveling the world alone helped you develop self-confidence as a woman?
When I finished high school, I was 17 years old and I moved to Istanbul to practice. I went there by myself to a country that I didn't know, Turkey was very different from Poland, culturally speaking. And I was a young woman still just really growing up. I wouldn't even say I was just developing into a woman, from being a teenager. And I would say it was a rough experience where I had to also grow up very quickly on many different levels. But I think it definitely helped the confidence of, me feeling like I can just deal with anything that life throws at me because I've dealt with so many things already that it doesn't matter. It was just, bring it on.
You put the rackets down in 2017. How did you decide to become a pro coach?
I never planned on becoming a coach. I never wanted to be a coach, actually. This was not even an option for me. I always felt like coaching was a really lonely job. And since I was traveling, pretty much my whole life that I can remember to tournaments myself, I thought that one day I would just want to stay a little bit more in one place and not travel the world as much. But then a friend of mine asked me if I could help her a couple of weeks. And I said, a couple of weeks, of course I can help. I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do yet. I was just also finishing my studies. So, I was trying to discover what's next. And a couple of weeks turned into full-time. There were signs that I would be coaching, even when I was younger, but I just didn't see them. I always helped out my friends, at tournaments and stuff. And I always liked it. I liked, looking at tennis more through the eye of a coach rather than a player, I would say. But I could only see it, in retrospect rather than at the time that it was happening. I don't like the label identity. I would say that, my identity as a coach, simply because I struggled with my identity being a tennis player when I was playing. And it almost felt like everything was dependent on me winning or losing. How I felt about myself was dependent. So I felt good, like a good person when I won matches, and I felt like a bad person when I lost matches. And it took some time for me to get out of it and to understand that, my worth as a person has nothing to do with, me being a tennis player. At the end of the day, it's just a job. It's a job that I love and I wouldn't want to do anything else, but still it's just a job. So now as a coach, I try to, keep that separation as well. Of course, it is just a job, but it's a job that I love more than anything. But at the end of the day, yes, I work as a tennis coach rather than I am a tennis coach.
And it's something that so many of us former tennis players struggle with. How did you break out of that mold and find yourself beyond the court?
It was one specific moment that it happened, and it was 2012 when I qualified for my first slam. It was in London, and my brother also lives in London, and I don't really get to see him often, but always during Wimbledon he was naturally there. And I was staying with him at the time, and I qualified, and something that was supposed to be the best experience for me, because I've always dreamt of playing main rows of Grand Slams, and here I was playing my first slam. The only thing that I remember is seeing the draw and deciding that I need to make at least fourth round, and if I don't get to the fourth round, it's going to be terrible. I lost in the first round in the end, but really my whole experience of the tournament was not very positive. And after that, I started asking myself, wait a second, something is not right. I've dreamt of this place my whole life, ever since I picked up a tennis racket, and now I am here. I earned it, I got here, and I'm not happy. Something is just not clicking here. So I just started digging and thinking and, talking with my fellow colleagues on the court and ex-players and, the coach that I was working with at the time. And long story short, I just realized that we tie our identity so much to this, because that's in some ways is the only way that we know how to measure ourselves. We as players, we measure ourselves by ranking and by matches that we win or lose. So since we start playing very young and we are just developing our identities as humans as well, it's very easy for this to get intertwined, and I think that's what happens for a lot of players. It certainly happened for me.
I measure success based on results still, and it's past my tennis career. When did you feel like you were able to be at peace with your career and walk away?
I was at peace with my tennis career when I played because I loved playing. Even if I don't like it, or if I just play because I want to be successful, I'm going to get there and it's not going to change anything, and I'm still going to be miserable. So if I'm going to be miserable off the court, even if I win all the slams, I'm still going to be miserable. It's really the success is not going to change anything. And I think coming to this, accepting that, it took me maybe 1-2 years, but it was, through the injuries as well. But I do understand, now I'm coaching, I'm on the other side of the same sport. And I still measure things by results too. I measure my coaching, whether I'm a good or / successful coach, by my results, because I think that's the only way to measure it, right? I mean, if I help my player win, it means I'm doing something right. If my player doesn't win, it means I need to reevaluate, or I need to find a different way. But it's different because that has nothing to do with my worth as me. I'd rather have players that are, let's say, 10 or 20 in the world, but they're happy and fulfilled with what they did, and not just on the court, but also off the court, rather than having a player that's number one, wins everything, and that's miserable. I hope that I can prove myself and with my players that winning slams and being number one in the world, you can do that, and you can also be very fulfilled and happy at the same time.
With Marta Kostyuk, she's heading into the US Open, but looking at the year as a whole, what are your goals for her?
The long-term goal, maybe this week, but maybe next year or in 2 years, is to win a slam. That's the dream. And be top 10, definitely. But I think these are all side effects of the things that you are doing right every single day on the practice court.
And you're working with her after she just got married. How cool is it for you to be with her during such a milestone in her life?
Yeah, this is amazing. I think this is one of the part where I'm talking that I want, my players to be happy and fulfilled. I was also at their wedding, it was a beautiful ceremony, and just also looking how they are growing together, because I'm close with George, with her husband as well. Of course, we are all together all the time, right, for most of the year. So it's a really amazing thing to witness.
What advantages are there of being a female coach? Because there are not that many female coaches on the WTA tour, even less on the ATP tour.
Yeah, you have a feeling that you can relate a little bit better. And I think that helps because, you spend so much time together, right? It's really all about this connection and this trust. And sometimes it's the tiniest things that can help.
How do you build trust?
Letting the person be who they are, right? So I think this is the key thing. You just have to be very curious about the player or just the person that you want to connect with, because ultimately that is how they feel that you are genuinely interested. And yeah, little by little, it's spending time with each other and being curious.
The best coaches that I've worked with on the court have been such good listeners. How have you felt like you've grown as a listener since playing to coaching?
I like to talk a lot, so that's listening definitely was something that I had to learn because I'm always talking. So wherever, I will be always talking. And with players, that's it. You have to be there for them, and they are the ones that are talking. So you need to encourage them, even if they are. I'm sure that sometimes there are players that are not that open, or they are not very talkative. But your job as a coach is to encourage them to talk, because the more you know as a coach about how they feel and about what's going on, the more you can help them, of course. So, this is definitely a switch that I had to make, but it's necessary, So again, you want to be the best coach that you can be. You know that you need to do this, and you just do it.
What do you think needs to be done to encourage more women to coach on the tour?
A bit of confidence. I feel like there are such amazing female coaches out there, but they are wondering whether it's enough what they have, and it actually is. I've had a chance to meet many female coaches that haven't coached on the tour level, but I feel like they know so much more than me, and they would be so much better. And really, they are just ready to be there and to coach. So I think it's more about just giving it a go and seeing how it goes, because also on a pro level with a player, the player needs to feel like you have it under control and you know what you're doing. If they feel like there's some doubt in you, then they're going to doubt as well. So I think it's very important to just portray that confidence on them, that you know what you're doing, and even if things are not going right sometimes, you still stick with your plan, and that's it. You keep going. So I would say that just a little bit more. I think confidence is something that you develop, but just a little more guts, just go in there, throw yourself, and then see what happens.
And I've talked to other female coaches in other sports, and including male-dominated sports, that talk about their intuition and their ability to connect with people based on the emotional side. Do you feel that as a female coach?
Yeah, I think so too. I think that, that's generally something that females do. We do it. We always say, oh, I feel that, I feel this, I feel that. I had good vibes from that person. I didn't have very good vibes from the person. So definitely, that helps in the connection. And I think especially working with female players, they perceive things the same way. So instantly the connection goes quicker. Obviously, Marta, everyone always talks about what an emotional player she is and how much she shows her emotions. And I always say that it's a good thing, and I love that about her. I think that, she wouldn't be the same player without it. Of course, the goal is for this to work for her rather than against her. So this is what she's working on, but it also comes with just the growth as a person, right? I had this also once with Petra, very similar thing. It was in Miami. She was playing Ash Barty, and back then there was still on-court coaching, so I came on the court, and she starts telling me something, and she's basically venting, I don't remember what she was saying, but oh, I don't feel this, I don't feel that, blah, 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 blah. And I go, it's okay, I understand. And she looked at me and she's like, no, you don't understand. And I was like, okay, noted. I don't understand, never ever again tell a player you understand when they vent. Just validate it, yes, it's okay, and that's it.
I'm reading this book called Super Communicators, and it's literally about listening. And I realized that coaches just have that skill, which we talked about earlier. What would you say if you were to give yourself some advice, maybe 5-6 years ago when you started coaching?
I would say go for more. Because I feel like I put some limits on myself, I think it was mostly because, first of all, I didn't know why I was there. I never planned on being there, right? And then suddenly I'm there amongst the best players in the world. I think that the player will always feel what you feel. So if you feel like there are limits, the player will also feel like there are limits. If you feel like, you believe 100% that the player can be number one in the world and win everything, it's going to translate to the player as well.
Do you think that you would ever coach ATP players?
I would love to. It would be a very, very different experience. But during my time with Mouratoglou Academy, I had my role was a bit different because I was scouting future, hopefully, Grand Slam champions and bringing them to the academy, and also helping the players that we had at the academy, the existing ones. And it was both boys and girls, from ages 8 to 20 years old. So really as broad as it gets. And I spent some time with guys on court, and I actually loved it. It seemed so simple and just refreshing, very different from women's tennis. And yeah, definitely, I would say that it would be cool.
How do you think that an agency like Unbox Sports could help you build your personal brand?
I think Patrick, what Patrick did himself was he opened the door for coaches to build brands. He did it all on his own, and I think this is what Unbox is trying to do right now with, more coaches and bringing, more coaches maybe that don't have the same opportunity, that are not going to build academies, like him, but coaches are valuable. Patrick opened the door, showed that it's possible, and now there's, hopefully, many more to come.
And how do you think that Unbox Sports could help reshape the coaching landscape as a whole?
When we make the coach's role more visible, I would say, I don't want to say important because it is important, it's just not very visible. I think that, tennis fans or brands, they don't really see, they see the player more. The coaches are just like, okay, there's someone behind, but they're not as big as in other sports, right? There's going to be more quality. I think that there's going to be more quality in coaching. Coaches are going to have better opportunities as well, not just on the court, but also off the court, right? And I think that's super important because you have players that have, their commitments off the court. They of course they live through tennis and through their game, but through that they get brands, they get different endorsements, all of that. And I think if this is possible to happen for coaches as well, that's going to bring an entirely different quality of coaching also, because the coaches will be evaluated on many more things than just what they do on the court with a certain player. And then I think coaches eventually will be more motivated too, because you will know that if you have good results with a player, it's not just going to be that you will have a better chance to be hired by another player, but you also have a better chance of getting different deals and endorsements, which in the end add up to your value as a coach on the court and off the court.